Senior Senator from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak about the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, and then I will be asking unanimous consent to consider legislation. We included the Restaurant Revitalization Fund in our March legislation on COVID relief. We did that because of all of the industries affected by COVID-19. Restaurants have been some of the most difficult businesses to survive COVID-19. They were ordered by government basically to shut down at the beginning of COVID-19. Then, as we started to make progress, they were at much restricted operations. And even to this day, restaurants are still not up to their full capacity. Their revenues have been very much decimated as a result of COVID-19. We came together in March with bipartisan legislation in order to do something about that. And we included that in our legislation, $28.6 billion of relief for restaurants. Now, what it did is cover some of their revenue loss as a result of COVID-19. It gave them a lifeline to be able to survive this pandemic. And we projected that $28.6 billion would be the need, but we were wrong. We were wrong because COVID-19 was more severe than we thought. Restaurants were more badly damaged than we had anticipated, and there was a great deal of more demand and need than the $28.6 billion. We are now being told by the Small Business Administration that the right number was $71.3 billion, or an additional $42.7 billion that is needed. I've introduced bipartisan legislation to provide this additional authority to the SBA to complete this program. It's bipartisan. My partner in this is Senator Wicker. We're joined by Senator Schumer, Senator Murkowski, Senator Cantwell, Senator Ernst, Senator Sinema, Senator Cassidy, Senator Stabenow, and Senator Hyde-Smith. And I might add, there are many, many more senators on both sides of the aisle that very much support our efforts to live up to our commitment. Now, why do we need to take this up right now? This is a matter of life or death for many restaurants in our community. There's also a matter of fairness. We have two restaurants side by side in the exact same circumstances, submitting their applications on the same day, having the exact same need. Both were advised that they would get funding. One got funding before the $28.6 billion was exhausted. The other that was told that they were going to get funding, they won't get funding unless we act. That's not right. There's a matter of the credibility of the United States Senate and of Congress and of government. We say we're going to do something, we should live up to our commitments. The urgency of getting this done is now. I don't think there's a senator in this chamber who hasn't heard from restaurants in their state about how badly they need these funds and how they thought these funds were going to be in their bank and they're no longer in this bank. I've heard from so many senators directly about this. The urgency is now. And let me just anticipate one other argument that I might hear. And that is, well, where are we getting this money from? Well, Mr. President, legislation before us takes $36 billion out of the small business programs. $36 billion. So this is paid for by the rescissions that have been made in this legislation that we are considering that's before us today. So for all those reasons, this is a fiscally responsible thing to do. And then lastly, let me say, before I yield the floor to the majority leader, let me say that we made a commitment to help our small businesses. We did that, Democrats and Republicans working together. In some cases, we overestimated the dollars that we need. In some cases, we underestimated the dollars that we need. But we always came back and provided the full funding for the programs we've authorized. And in total, it's not much different than has previously been authorized. This is a matter of fairness and a matter of absolute need that we provide the extra money now for the restaurants. And before I make my unanimous consent request, I would yield the floor so the majority leader can get the floor.
Well, I thank
Majority Leader is recognized.
I thank my good friend from Maryland for offering this UC and strongly and fervently support it. I've been proud to join Senators Cardin and Schumer in leading the fight to provide direct relief to this industry. We all know restaurants were particularly hard hit during COVID. And the idea that they have all recovered is just so far from the truth. You know, any business where people had to gather were hit hard, hit the hardest. Restaurants at the very top of the list. And they're a lifeblood to our cities and our communities. They, of course, are a place where people get food, but they get community, they join together, they feel roots, whether it's a small town or a large city. Restaurants in neighborhood after neighborhood, community after community, are often the glue that makes communities tick. And they were hurt. The funds that we provided a lifeline to 100,000 applicants across the country. In my state of New York, $3.6 billion went to 9,775 restaurants. But the job wasn't done. They ran out of money long before restaurants were helped. And anyone who thinks our restaurants are out of trouble, I just ate at one last night, a Polish couple, Greenpoint, lovely little restaurant. Are you hurting? Yes, we might go under. And this story could be repeated in restaurant after restaurant after restaurant. In New York, 27,000 restaurants are waiting in desperation. These are hardworking people, very hardworking people. They struggle. They put their all, their whole heart and soul into the business and provide, as I said, often the glue for our communities. This legislation is fair. It is smart. It is right. We will get economic payback over and over and over again from keeping these restaurants going because they employ so many people, contract with so many independent suppliers and others. It just makes such sense. It's almost cruel to tell these restaurants, you're on your own now, when through no fault of their own they suffered through with COVID. So I strongly support this proposal by Senator Cardin. We're going to keep at it and keep at it and keep at it because our restaurants so desperately need the help. It was bipartisan in the past. Let's keep it bipartisan, but let's get the job done. Our restaurants need help, and our communities, our cities, our rural towns, our suburbs will be so rewarded when these restaurants are allowed to continue to stay open and to flourish. I thank the Senator for his leadership.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me thank Senator Schumer for his comments. Agree completely with everything you said. Just make one additional point before I make my unanimous consent request. What I'm asking for now has been what we have been following in regards to small business relief. Let me remind our colleagues that we work together, Democrats and Republicans, to craft the programs that help small business and save so many small businesses in our community. We misprojected the cost of the Paycheck Protection Program, not by $30 or $40 billion, by over $300 billion when we set it up. And we came back, Democrats and Republicans, lived up to our commitment and made the funds available that all small businesses could get fair treatment and equitable treatment under the Paycheck Protection Program. I'm asking my colleagues to do the exact same thing we did for the Paycheck Protection Program for the Restaurant Revitalization Program. And as already pointed out, there's been funds taken away from the small business programs under the bill we're considering on the floor today to almost the same amount that we're asking in supplemental funds. And with that, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S. 2675, introduced earlier today, that the bill be considered read 3 times and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid on the table.
Is there objection?
Mr. President,
Junior senator from Kentucky is recognized.
the Treasury has been so thoroughly looted that we are incurring debt at a record-setting and alarming pace. Never in the history of our country have we incurred so much debt so fast. Our national debt now exceeds $28 trillion. It is now at 128% of our GDP. And we are asked by the Democrat Party to add $48 billion without so much as could we have a debate in committee, so much as even a word spoken over this. We're just going to add $48 billion with no discussion. It's a huge mistake. Now, it has been alleged that, well, the thing is that the restaurants are suffering because of COVID. No, they're suffering because Democrat governors locked them down. This is a man-made phenomenon. The economic disaster that we are in, that restaurants are in, is completely and entirely caused by Democrat governors. In my state, they're suing the Democrat governor because he won't let them open up. This is a man-made phenomenon. So if you reward a man-made phenomenon, you'll get more of it. You reward Democrat governors who shut these restaurants down, guess what? They'll shut them down longer. The longer you give money to Democrat governors for their lockdown policies, the more lockdowns you'll get. We need to open up the country. We need to learn to live with this disease. As tragic as it has been, we need to learn to live with it, but the lockdowns have not worked. Closing the restaurants did not work, did not change the trajectory of this virus one iota. The only thing that is changing the trajectory of this virus now is the vaccine plus natural immunity. Closing restaurants did nothing and is doing nothing except for devastating the bottom line of restaurants. So with that, Mr. President, I would object to the unanimous consent.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President,
Senator from Maryland.
I regret the position of my colleague from Kentucky. I just really want to point out we have had hearings in our committee, Small Business Committee, in which the Restaurant Revitalization Act was very much brought up during the hearing. We've been receiving timely information about this program and how it's been implemented and the need for additional funds. So our committee has had ample opportunity to question how the program is being administered and the need for additional funds. I also regret that my colleague is holding the restaurants pretty much hostage and saying it's all right for us to give money to some but not others, when the administration of this was compromised because of a court case, and certain restaurants are now desperate as a result of not having adequate funds. I'm encouraged by the comments of the Majority Leader, Senator Schumer, that we will continue to focus on this issue. I can tell you it's urgent. We really need to deal with this immediately, and we'll be looking for every available opportunity to treat our restaurants equitably and fairly and provide the money that's needed to implement the Restaurant Revitalization Program. I regret that we're not able to act today because of the Senator's objection. I yield the floor.